Welcome everyone to Spherical Luminosity's YouTube Live. And if you've watched the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once or ever wondered how the multiverses work, then I think you're going to find this YouTube Live fascinating. A lot of people have said that they enjoy it when I go into left field, and we're going to go way, way into left field today. So some of you already commented in the chat who you are, or at least put your name and where you're from. So please let me know where you are. It's good to see you all here. We have the Kiwis, Pam and Chris from New Zealand, and Cindy Smith from Dallas, excuse me. Mike and Mary from Colorado, I see you. Good to see you guys. Amy Bader from Seattle, Washington. Who is this? Georgiana from Portland, Oregon. Hello, Georgiana. All right. And then she is Annette from, wait, I just lost that somehow, New Jersey. And Anne. Oh, hello, Anne from Minneapolis. All right. So, and everyone else who I didn't get to greet by name. So it's lovely to see you all. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Karen Cheong, and many of you know me already. And like I said, some of you don't. So for those of you who are new, I help to catalyze awakening and a rise in human consciousness by releasing people's conscious and unconscious blocks at what I refer to as frequency level, amplifying your awareness of the divine within so you can recognize and live the abundance and limitlessness of your true nature as infinite, indestructible consciousness. This is your birthright, and the time for humanity to awaken to this possibility is now. So for those of you who are brand new to frequency work and don't know much about it, you know, your friend forwarded you this link and you're like, okay, I'll check it out. I can only give a brief overview in the amount of time I have. So after this, if you want to learn more, I'd recommend checking out episodes 1 and 2 of my vlog and podcast series, Mastering Your World Through Frequencies, which is also on this very YouTube channel. So those 2 episodes are all about the frequency work fundamentals or the mechanics of frequency work. And there's also the How It Works section of the website, sphericalluminosity.com. So a few weeks ago, a friend recommended this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And the title in itself was intriguing to me because I was thinking to myself, as soon as I heard it, I'm like, wow, that is the perspective of somebody who is in the eternal now. And it mirrors my own experience of merging into the oneness. And I was really curious to see what this movie would be about and what the filmmaker's take would be. And the other thing that I found totally fascinating was that this movie would even get made for general consumption. And it seems like there's quite a buzz about it. So Chris and I decided to check it out ourselves. It's just really fascinating to me that at this time when we're seeing all this polarity, we see this interest in consciousness. Okay, so yes, it masquerades to some degree kind of oddly as a kung fu movie, but it also is discussing some really big topics. So ultimately, to me, the movie is an intellectual or mental understanding of awakening and oneness. But it's not quite getting it because the perspective is too limited or too linear and mired in the small s itself, which while making the concept of the multiverses understandable to the mind, it isn't actually accurate completely into how things work. So I'm just going to discuss a few themes or premises in the movie that were raised, and I'll go through them and give my take from frequency perspective or the perspective of the big S self or consciousness. Okay? And we'll answer some questions, and then we're going to get into a GFC, which will help you be able to access more of this higher level consciousness that will allow you to access higher realms. It depends on where you are really in your frequency resonance, how safely you can do this. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. But anyway, that's what the GFC will be about today. So in the movie, for those of you who've seen it, there's something called the Alphaverse, right? And there's like alpha women and alpha, like all the characters have an alpha person, right? Like an alpha name. There's like Alpha Gong Gong, who's like the alpha granddad, which is kind of hilarious, who is like the dominant one. So they're the ones with the little headsets on that are in the van, and they're the ones who are sort of coordinating the jumps between the different multiverses. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. So in the movie, so just for those of you who haven't seen it, just in case you haven't, essentially what happens is Michelle Yeoh is a woman who's in her middle age, who is a Chinese immigrant who's running a laundromat. And she's in trouble with the IRS because she's been deducting expenses for her things that she shouldn't be. And in the middle of this interview with the IRS, she starts to encounter Alpha Wayman, who's her husband, but from a different universe, okay, or a different reality, who seems to know more about what's going on, because it looks like this surface of everything's normal, they're just going for an IRS thing, but actually there's this this battle against this evil being that's trying to spread chaos into the universe, and he's trying to stop this evil being by finding Michelle Yeoh, who's the only one who can stop the evil being named I can't remember her name. Who ends up being Michelle Yeoh's daughter. Okay, and I can't remember her name. But anyway, someone type in the chat what the name of the evil daughter's name is. I can't remember her name. The villain, supposedly. Okay. So anyhow, that's the movie. And so Michelle Yeoh is trying to survive being attacked by all these different beings who are trying to like take her down. And she has to like tap into different versions of herself from different universes that have different skills in order to prevail against the evil, whatever her name is. I can't remember her name. In any case, so that's sort of a very rough, probably not great synopsis of the movie, but that's basically the movie. All right. Yeah, Joku Tabuki. That's it. That's the name of the evil person. Joku Tabuki. That's it. Thank you, Mauricio. I was like, what is the name of this person? Okay, so anyway, Joku Tabuki, who is spreading chaos and evil throughout all the multiverses. And those in the Alphaverse are trying to stop Joku Tabuki for taking over everything. Okay, that's, I think, the premise of the movie. Okay, so let's start with the very fundamental premise. Okay, is there an Alphaverse, and does everything really exist all at once? So it's actually true. To some degree. Okay, so here I'm going to back up and give it a little nuance. There are infinite realities. Okay, and the thing that distinguishes one reality from another is simply that they have a different frequency resonance. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's not true there's an Alphaverse. Sorry, Chris is correcting me. It's not true this is an Alphaverse. It's true that there are infinite possibilities that exist at the same time. That's actually true. Did I say that properly? Okay. The Alphaverse concept isn't actually true. Okay, so sorry about that. I was confusing when I said that. Okay. So, but like I said, the thing that distinguishes the different realities is simply a different resonance of space and time. Okay, so a lot of you have heard me talk about the 0 point. You've heard me talk about space and time. If you don't know what I'm talking about and about the different resonances of space and time, I do recommend that you check out episode 80, What is the Frequency Resonance of Time, in this vlog series that we have on mastering, on this very website for mastering your wealthy frequencies. Also, there is the episode 151, which is centering into the 0 point. Okay, so all these different episodes will tell you what the difference is between space and time and why they're so important. But the difference between each of these resonances is very simple. It's literally a tiny shift in vibration. And that is what makes different realities exist. Okay, that's a distinction between them. So all of those exist. They exist in the infinite field of possibilities at the same time. The way that you would access them is to be able to bridge into what I call the eternal now. The eternal now is that form of time that everything on spirit exists at. Okay. And at that level of frequency resonance, at that level of consciousness, everything is happening in the now. Linear time, linear time is a compression of time that we as humans with our brains do to basically understand time, because our brains are not advanced enough or able to handle everything happening all at once. Just think about how much information that is and how much your mind can process. So even though your brain is spectacular, it cannot handle the infiniteness of everything happening at the same moment in time, whereas you as consciousness can. All right. So what I will say is also in that movie about, all those different worlds that they were in, that was actually assuming that all those different worlds were at the same level of consciousness. That's not actually accurate. Not only do you have infinite possibilities in this realm of consciousness, but you also have the higher levels of consciousness where things are totally different. So it's actually more complex than what the movie indicated. Also, in terms of the Alphaverse, which Chris was correct in suggesting to me that that wasn't accurate, because it isn't. It's not that there's an alphaverse. Okay, so here's the thing. You as consciousness, okay, so I'm getting a little technical, all right? But I think you can hang with me. So you as consciousness, imagine your infinite, indestructible consciousness. You want to have an experience of density or form or embodiment. You project yourself, the consciousness, through the coordinate of space and time, okay, of a certain reality. For you guys, it's this one, right? And the reason that you have this experience that's joined or collective is because we agree on the 0 point of time. All right. If not, we would all have very separate experiences because we all descended through the veil of forgetting. When you descend through the veil of forgetting from high level vibration of consciousness into embodiment, you forget that you are part of everything and everything is part of you. And you forget about the eternal now. So you drop into linear time. Okay. So in any case, what you're doing is, because your consciousness is projecting through this very specific coordinate of space and time, that's what you're focused on. That's the dominant reality that you experience. So it's not like all those possibilities aren't out there. They are, but your consciousness is focused on this one. Okay. So that's what the dominant experience is for you. Now, there are some people who are what we would call like schizophrenic, or who have trouble holding this particular space-time resonance. Okay, it's really difficult for them. So they experience different realities all at the same time, which is very, very confusing for them. So let me just give you an example of what that would look like. So just imagine in this particular space-time resonance, you're married to somebody, okay, and they are a certain way. Well, in a different space-time resonance, you're not married. You've never met, in fact. So and then in another space-time resonance, you actually hate each other. Or in another space-time resonance, you're just friends. Or in another space-time resonance, instead of being nice to you, they're always mean, but you're married. Do you see what I'm saying? There are all these different like permutations of what could be. So for somebody who can't hold this space-time resonance, they get dragged into all these different realities and they don't know which reality they're in. So it's like, who's going to show up? You and your like partner who are married and get along, or are they the mean one, or are they the friend? Like, who's going to show up? Do you see how disconcerting that could be? All right. And so it's very destabilizing to experience life like that. It's also totally terrifying. Okay. So it's really important that you understand the 0 point of space and time, because once you understand that, then you can understand stability and how you can journey into other space-time resonances. So what does it all mean? Here's the bottom line. All those possibilities exist. Okay. As you clarify your frequency resonance, as it gets higher, the one, like they kind of all become one. Like you experience like a dominant space-time resonance because you're so present in the present moment of linear time. And because you're so clear in that, you get to experience, you can, if you want to, different space-time resonances, but from a place of stability, because you're very strong internally. So what happens with the example I gave where the person's schizophrenic, they get pulled into those different space-time resonances, which is really scary. They don't have control over it. But if you're strong enough internally, you can actually go to those different space-time resonances and be in them and understand them without going crazy. Does that make sense? Because you're stable yourself. You know where home is. So you can be aware of those different realities without basically losing your mind. All right. So that's why being internally strong is so important. You get to then be able to govern where it is that you get to go intentionally in terms of where you journey with your consciousness, as opposed to getting pulled into different space-time resonances, which are scary. Okay. So hopefully that made sense.
They don't also become one. You just said they all become one, but they don't really become one.
No, it's not that they become one. Sorry, Chris is saying like, it's not, you said that they become one. It's not, sorry, that I misspoke. It's not that the timelines become one. It's just that the one that you're in clarifies and becomes a higher and higher resonance. And because it becomes of a higher resonance and you're so present in it, you're able to experience the other ones from a place of strength. That's hopefully more clear. Okay, so sorry about that if that was confusing. Okay, so And it's hard. So just so you know, guys, it's very difficult to explain all this linearly, right? So the filmmakers had to present a movie in a way that was linear. So you guys would all, well, not you guys, but everyone be able to follow it with their brains. To be able to experience and to be able to explain the multiverses actually requires nonlinear thinking because it's not linear. So whilst I'm trying to explain this in a way for you to understand, if you don't get what I'm saying, it's totally fine. Just be in the frequency resonance of my voice. On some level, you'll understand. And as your frequency resonance rises, it'll start to make sense to you. It's really kind of spectacular. So the other thing is in that movie, it was kind of like the way it was presented was because, to give it tension, the main character was under attack, right? So she needed to have a kung fu skill from this version or this universe, or, there was a universe where she had fingers like hot dogs and was lovers with Jamie Lee Curtis's character and, the one who was trying to kill her. So there's all this like sort of mishmash. Okay. And the premise was it's almost like you need to access those different versions in order to fix the version that she was in, right? Where she was being attacked. All right. So what I'm going to say about all that, it's like, can I use the different versions of me from different universes to fix my life? Right. That's kind of like where they were going with that a little bit. All right. So what I will say about this is that's a very small SF perspective of how the universes work and what the point is. Really, the only reason they even had that perspective is because they wanted a certain outcome. They weren't actually in the big S self experience where they're in acceptance of all outcomes. Okay. So what's more cool than specific skills from different space-time resonances is to access the higher level frequency of the limitless of like the higher level frequency resonance of you at a higher level order, or the limitless of the abundance of the eternal now, which is where everything happens all at once, and bring that experience of consciousness into embodiment so you can live an expanded and more abundant experience. And that's exactly what we're doing in San Miguel de Allende in our retreat, October 5th and 6th. And it's truly 5th to 9th, October 5th to 9th. So it's truly cutting edge consciousness work, and I'm super excited about it. Okay. We really are getting to this point in consciousness where we can start to experience this in the embodiment. It's no longer a theoretical idea. It's no longer something you only experience in meditation. You get to experience it in your life, which is where the exciting thing is for me. Okay. So, all right. That was sort of idea number one. So hopefully I didn't make a total mess of that and you could somewhat understand it. Sorry, guys. All right. So there's this idea in the movie that there's no meaning in anything. Okay. And therefore everything, because there's no meaning, because there's all these possibilities, everything is meaningless except for love. Right. So the reason that, what's her name? Joku, whatever, Gobuki, or whatever her name was, the evil one. She was evil because she didn't care about anything. Right? Nothing mattered because it was all meaningless because she could be in any possibility anywhere. So it didn't really matter, right? So she didn't care about anything. And the thing that saves the movie in the end is that Michelle Yeoh's character has a tremendous love for her daughter. And love is the force that overcomes all of the challenges, right? So her response to everything is to respond with love. Okay. So this is partially correct. Okay. And I just want to talk about this because humans have an affinity for this idea of love. Okay. So it is true that there's actually no meaning to anything. There really isn't. Meaning is only a function of the mind, and it's a very human construct. We like to have meaning. We like to have story. But it's not despair. It's more like nothing has meaning. And as a result, you get to choose what experience you want and what it means to you and how you get to grow from it. This is all simply life unfolding and experiencing life. Okay, so it's more in the movie, it was like a heavy thing and negative. It's not actually. It's actually freedom because it's about what you get to experience. What do you choose to experience? So the higher your frequency resonance is, the higher and better the possibilities you get to experience. The more you understand or know that you can access any possibility. the more you experience this as a celebration of life rather than something that causes despair. So unlike in the movie where it's this horrible thing and there's no meaning except for the love bit at the end, it's not despair. It's actually glorious. Okay. And you get to choose, like I said. It's actually about sovereignty. Okay. The amount of choice that you get to exercise, of what you get to experience and learn as a being. Okay. So I'm going to move to the next idea. Right. So the next idea is that love, and I sort of touched on it at the beginning, but love is the force that overcomes all of the challenges. Okay. And like I said, what saves the movie in the end is Michelle Yeoh is in such tremendous love for her daughter. She starts to expand that love into a love for everything. It's a love for her daughter and also her love for her husband. Okay. But it's like everything becomes love for her. Okay. So what I'll say is people talk about love as if it's the highest resonating frequency, but it's actually not. Okay. I don't mean that disparagingly because love is a wonderful consciousness. Please don't get me wrong. Okay. Love as a consciousness is spectacular. It's extremely high in its resonance, but it's not the highest order of frequency resonance. And certainly the love that humans have for each other is actually filled with distortion, control, fear, and all kinds of things. Okay. It's always filtered through our distortion patterns. And in fact, I think in the movie, the villain was created, or Joku Tabuki was created because in that universe, Michelle Yeoh was pressing her daughter really hard, and like her mind basically had a meltdown, and she was able to access that oneness thing, but in a very distorted way. Okay, so the love she had for her daughter was very distorted in that universe. So love, in a human sense, can be very distorted, especially like I said in the human construct of love. Because love and control and fear are all very intermingled in our experience. If you think about love, really, truly, think about how it's mixed in with a whole bunch of other things. So what is the highest resonance, though, is pure source. Everything is beloved by pure source. Everything. So whatever judgment you have of what is happening to you, okay? So in the parallel thing in the movie would be, whether she's killed, taxed, loses her daughter, loses her husband, gets swallowed by the everything bagel, whatever, is a human judgment of whether that is good or bad. It's just a possibility that you could experience. Okay. So I'm not saying from the human perspective, there's not difficulty or challenge in experiencing that, because from the human perspective, it can be really horrible. Okay. And from the bigger perspective of the big S self of consciousness, there's not that judgment. It's really just the experience of life unfolding. So the takeaway is this, okay? The higher in resonance your frequency is, meaning your personal frequency resonance, the more you release distortion patterns, the more you practice the 6 core essentials that I talk about in Mastery and Momentum, the 6 core essentials, the deeper your connection with pure source. And in that connection, when you reach a certain level of frequency resonance, you realize that you are one, not in a way that is meaningless in the movie, but one in a way that is so connected, so full, so that you are part of everything and everything is part of you. You are so complete. There is no despair. There's none. And there's not this like callous, like, I don't care, I don't give a shit about anything, because that was what the villain had. Like, I don't give a shit about anything. That's actually not an awakened state. It's not like that. There's no despair because it's whole, complete, one. And how could you be in despair when you have that? Okay, there's only fullness, really. So it's quite opposite to what they portray in the movie. And the love that you feel for everything, because it is, as a human, that feeling of love, but it's not conditioned by anything. You feel everything as part of you and you part of everything. And it's this expansive, glorious, magnificent feeling. And it's even like the clarity of it is like, I guess you could call it love, but it's hard to explain a feeling, right? Like, how do you explain a feeling? But it's so clear and so complete. It every time I feel it, it makes me cry because it's so beautiful. Okay, so there's no despair whatsoever. Let me just make that really super clear. So the next thing I'm just going to mention. So this idea of the everything bagel, okay, that I thought was hilarious, right? So behind the curtain, right, in this like white sort of scene, behind it was like, I don't know if there was angel singing or whatever, but there was this like everything bagel, right? Joko Tabuki had put everything in the everything bagel, right? And there's this moment where Michelle Yeoh is almost getting sucked into the everything bagel, right? And she had to really resist to not get sucked into it, right? Okay. I thought this was hilarious and a really clever sort of idea or representation of what actually is the void. Okay. So the void, just so you all know, a lot of people will think the void is this place where you feel empty and there's nothing and you feel empty inside. That is not the void. Okay, that is a subjective human experience of emptiness, okay, and a sense of lack of completeness in self. The void is a spectacular place. Okay, so many of you who have been following me for a while know what it is. It's a place of absolute dissolution and absolute potential from which all form comes, right? All form comes. So you know how they keep saying the universe is expanding, right? And so around and through everything is the void. And the physicists keep saying like 0.0000001% of everything is form or matter. 99.9999999% of everything that is nothing. It's not nothing. It's the void. So when the universe is expanding, it's becoming something. The void is absolute potential. It's the potential of where form comes from. So as the universe expands, it is the void coming into form. Okay? So that's the void. It's a glorious place. It is the place between all dimensional orders. It's the place between birth and death. It's everywhere and through everything. Okay? So unlike the movie, where it's bad because if she gets sucked into the everything bagel, she'll lose herself. It's really to learn how to become an ally with the void. Okay. So, because if you do, because what did I just say? Like it is potential, absolute potential. It's the place from where everything comes. So if you can become allies with the void and learn how to sit with it, okay, and to be in the nothingness, to be in the dissolution of it, you can also totally master creation manifestation because it's the place from which everything comes. It's extraordinarily powerful. It's totally feminine. And I'm telling you, anything can be created in the void. Anything. Okay, so if you master the void or become allies with it, then it can be a really wonderful place to be. Okay, so if you're curious about the void and the power of it, in one of the events I gave called Stability, Growth, Opportunity, and Leadership Amidst Chaos, we delved deep into the void. So you can check it out there, okay, if you want to. So to be able to create manifest effectively, you also need to be, like I said, comfortable in and access the void. And likely we'll be doing a new series on creation manifestation at some point. But that's for a different YouTube live and a different series that we'll be giving at some other point in the future. So the last thing I think that I'm going to address before we take questions, hopefully you guys are hanging in there. I can't actually see you. So hopefully you guys are doing okay and finding this interesting. So the one thing that they mentioned in the movie is the importance of the strength of the mind, right? Because if not, your mind will break, which is what happened to Joko Tabuki, right? Her mind broke. And that's why they call her absolute chaos, right? Because she doesn't care. She can be in all the realities, any possibility, and do whatever she wants because she totally understands. What does she understand, really? Actually, what she understands is that she can create anything. She's no different from you, actually. You can co-create anything too. It's just that you have a lot of distortion, but it prevents you from doing it. And you don't believe that it's possible. Okay? You actually can co-create anything. And part of, if your resonance isn't high enough, you can't. So meaning, what do I mean? The lower your frequency resonance, the less ability you have to co-create. The less you're in the present moment of linear time, the less ability you have to co-create. So Yeah, intentionally. So, I mean, you're co-creating all the time unintentionally and unconsciously. But as your frequency resonance rises by releasing your distortion patterns, you can create much more consciously. And what you can learn from different things like full spectrum coherence mastery or, relationship with a 1 2.0 is that you truly have the power to co-create everything. Okay? It's kind of spectacular. And we're just coming back into this remembering, which is really amazing. So here's the thing. In the movie, in order to be able to be in all the possibilities and to co-create everything, you had to be mentally strong enough. If not, your mind would break. Yeah? You would literally like lose your mind and then your body would shut down and die. Okay, so that's partially true, right? So like I mentioned in the very beginning of this thing, your mind can totally break if you explore the multiverses without being ready, meaning you aren't able to anchor yourself in space and time. Okay, if you can't find your way back to the space-time coordinate of this reality that is your home reality, your mind can break. Or you can have the experience of schizophrenia or multiple realities at the same time, which is just terrifying. It absolutely can cause you to go mad. Okay, however, it's not about the strength of your mind that keeps you from going insane if you're going to experience or explore the multiverses, which requires, by the way, a certain level of frequency resonance to do safely. It's about how focused you are in the 0 point of space and time. And if you don't know what the 0 point of space and time is, I'd watch episode 151 of Mastering Your World of Frequencies called the 0 point of space and time. So the more you're able to be further and further in the center of the 0 point, which is always refining it, the more unwavering you are in the present moment in linear time, the more you're able to perceive without splitting apart, because you have the strength to hold your frequency resonance and your attention in that 0 point, okay, to hold your center. So, there are stories, of course, where people don't do this, right? So where you ascend too quickly. So anybody who's a yogi, right? So anybody who's studied yoga or knows about Kundalini, you'll hear stories in the yogi community about people who lose their minds because their Kundalini wakes up and blasts through their spine. They awaken instantly and they totally lose their minds, right? So why does that happen to them? Well, if you have too much heaviness of distortion running in your field, and then you have a very heightened experience, very fast of awakening, right? You have two very different levels of frequency resonance in your system, and your system cannot bridge these extremes, right? So So you have this awakening experience, which is very, very high in resonance. And then you have the heaviness of your distortion patterns in your system. So what happens? You have this extreme polarity. You can't bridge it. Your mind will break, right? The system cannot handle it, because your system's trying to harmonize these two different experiences of frequency resonance and it can't do it. So the mind literally breaks, right? However, if you've been releasing your distortion patterns, practicing the core essentials, and strengthening, okay, by confirming the removal and doing frequency work or whatever the practice is, I'm sure there are others other than frequency work, your consciousness can expand into different space-time resonances without breaking. And you're able to find your way back to the dominant one. And it's not through the use of your mind. It has to just do with your internal strength. Okay? So, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to, so I said that wrong apparently, or I wasn't clear, and Chris is clarifying. Thank you, Chris. So it's not, your consciousness can't break. Okay, so hopefully I didn't say that wrong. I probably did. So your consciousness can't break because it's infinite and indestructible. What can break is your mind. Okay, because it can't process at the same speed. So your mind will break. Okay, if you have an awakening experience that's too rapid and you as a being have too much distortion running in you and the difference in the frequency resonance is too much. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Consciousness, infinite, indestructible, mind able to break because it can't compute all of that stuff. Make sense? So the thing is, as you rise in frequency resonance, or if you get to the point where, if you're working with someone like me, for example, because frequency work happens at the level of the eternal now and happens at that space where you are part of everything, everywhere, all at once, I am able to tap into different lifetimes. I am able to tap into different timelines. I am able to do all this. Why? Because I know where I am in my center, and I can and I can resolve all this different distortion that happens at different frequency resonances because I'm sitting in that space and I'm neutral, and therefore I'm able to work at the level that I am. Does that make sense? When your frequency resonance gets to a certain level, okay, and you're strong enough internally and you're in the eternal now, that's why I can do what I do, right? Which is why I can tell you what the different lifetimes are and resolve things in them and all that sort of stuff. Make sense? All right. So that was a lot of talking. I'll take a few questions. Hopefully that made sense. It was helpful. It was interesting to you. All right. So if you have questions, write question, and then Chris will highlight them, and I will read them and attempt to answer them the best I can. Sure. I don't know. I can't see it. Go for it. Do you think time has changed in the last 2 weeks? Suddenly many things seem to be happening really fast. Time has accelerated. It's been more than 2 weeks. From my perspective, where are we now? We're in August. To me, it started shifting in July. Beginning of July is when it really started to accelerate from my perspective. But yes, it's picking up more and more and more speed. Absolutely. So if you watch, I think it's the new frequency resonance of time, which I believe is episode 130, but I can't quite remember, but it's called the new frequency resonance of time. I talk about how the resonance of time is changing, like the actual vibrational speed of time is speeding up. And as a result, you can have more things happen and your acceleration can be faster in a shorter amount of time. Okay. So it just seems like more things happening in a shorter and shorter period of time. And that actually happens when the frequency resonance of time shifts. So yes, the frequency resonance of time is speeding up tremendously. And from my perspective, has been happening since July. We're in this window right now, and it's speeding up more and more. To answer your question. I'm wondering, as we move to higher order as a collective, will the 0 point of space and time change? Oh, that's a really great question. Yes, it does. Because, okay, I'm going to do my very best to explain this. It does, especially when enough of us do it. Okay. So like I said, your consciousness projects through a specific space-time coordinate to experience this reality. Okay. So this reality is set at a certain consciousness level. Okay. I'm getting super technical here. So please just roll. If you can't understand, just be in the frequency resonance of my voice. Okay. So as we move into this new consciousness that I keep talking about, because we are, the access point, the nexus of space and time changes because we are literally entering a new experience, a new reality, a new frequency resonance of consciousness, a higher resonating one. So therefore, yes, absolutely, the 0 point of space and time is shifting. And part of what we're doing in San Miguel de Allende is accessing that higher level 0 point of space and time so that you can reference it more easily in your embodiment, and your experience will be different than people who are accessing a different 0 point of space and time. Now, what's interesting in my experience is that if you're of a higher order, you can actually, for higher frequency resonance, sorry, that's what I meant, sorry, higher frequency resonance, you actually can understand and perceive the lower ones. You're aware of them. You're like, oh, look, there are the lower frequency resonances. Do I want to live there? Not particularly, but I'm aware that they're there, and I'm aware that other people are having experience there. But my personal experience is not there. Okay, so you get to have kind of both. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense, right? So you can, you have more mastery over where it is that your experience lies. Okay. Okay, sure. So the void and pure source are different spaces. Absolutely. So the void, so let me back up. So let me back up. Pure source is the very high resonating field of consciousness from which everything comes and from which everything returns. Everything is a pure source, including the void. Okay, so the void is within the framework of pure source. Okay, and it's this space that is very special, and like I said, sits between all the dimensional orders. So if you're moving your consciousness from one dimensional order to another, you must pass through the void. If you are between life and death. Like, in your death experience, if you're awakened, you will pass through the void. It's everywhere. It's the space where all form comes. It's kind of like, if you can imagine, like a womb space in a woman, right? It's like that. It's like a place from where everything is birthed. But it's different from pure source. Okay, its function is different. It has a totally different resonance. It's very still, and yet it's vibrating at the same time. It sounds like it's hard to explain, because how do you explain a feeling, right? How do you explain a resonance? So I'm trying my best to tell you what it is. And what I'll say is that when you feel it, you can feel the potential in it. Okay, pure source is different. Pure source is the one. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Chris, do you have a? So what I would say is that it's this. It's a very different frequency resonance. It's very, very high in resonance, and the void is within it. Does that make sense? So pure source is everything, contains everything. Everything is from it, including the void. But the void is a very important part of it that we're only starting to understand and explore. So, yeah, and it's everything unmanifest. It's everything that has yet to come into form. It's truly a space that most do not know about. And it is, I love it because I love potential. And also it's a space of ultimate dissolution. So if you can become allies with it, when you're in the void, you can release a tremendous amount of distortion, because it's a place of dissolution, right? I know we're afraid of dissolution because we equate it with death, but dissolution can be very handy when you're trying to dissolve things you don't want. Yes? Okay. Hopefully that is helpful. Okay. What's the difference between an ego death and the mind breaking? Can plant medicine break the mind? Yes, plant medicine can break the mind. Okay, so there's a lot of, so Patricia's asking you a really good question, and she's asking, can you do plant medicine safely? Okay, all right. So there's a lot of questions right there, right? So I'm gonna do my best to answer them. I might forget something, but I'll do my best. Okay. I'm gonna address the plant medicine first, and then I'm gonna address the first part of the question second. Okay. So plant medicine can be done safely, yes. What I would say about plant medicine is that if you do not have a good leader, like if you don't have a good curandero, if you do not have a good guide, you can lose where you are in this space, what space-time resonance is home for you. Okay, because they don't bring you back properly. They don't bring you back into the 0 point of space and time of this resonance properly. And so people sort of get lost, and they can lose their minds, because not all of them comes back into the space-time resonance. Does that make sense? They get like fragmented in different space-time resonances, and they don't all, like there's no coherence, and they don't come back fully into this space-time resonance. And they feel like something's lost, something's off, they feel terrible, things get like very fractured in their realities. It can be really horrifying. I've seen a lot of people, this happens a lot with people who do DMT, which is like divorced from ayahuasca, right? And a whole bunch of different things. So they just pop DMT because it's like the way to, access God or whatever it is that they think it does. And it literally, because there's no stability in it whatsoever, they start to experience all these different space-time resonances, and they are not brought back into this space-time resonance. It's really terrible. And so that is part of it. The other thing that Chris mentioned, which is important, is about the stability of the person who is doing the plant medicine. Like you personally, how stable are you? How high is your own frequency resonance? How anchored are you? How much distortion do you run? All that sort of stuff matters, right? So to say plant medicine generally is kind of hard. So all those things matter. That's why you can lose your mind, right? Does it make sense, right? You're experiencing all these different space-time resonances when you're journeying on plant medicine. Now, all of a sudden, you're not back in your dominant space-time. Trouble, okay? Because now your mind is starting to be fractured, okay? Your mind can't handle it. Not yours, Patricia. One's mind can't handle it, okay? Is there a way to do plant medicine safely? Like I said, you have to have I would clear your distortions as much as possible. I would be aware of why you're doing plant medicine and how much you're doing it and why do you feel you need to, Okay. So I'm not saying that you can't gain tremendous knowledge from plant medicine. You can. It's powerful. It's an extraordinary tool. And I've noticed that some people form an addiction to it because they need it to access the higher realms. They also like the significance of the story of the journeying. So while it can be very, like Chris had his own experience with plant medicine, and it was a very powerful experience for him. It actually changed his life in many ways. Okay, because he doesn't journey that way. I can, he doesn't. It changed his perspective of everything. He did it twice, I think, and you didn't need to do it again. So you have to ask yourself, why do you feel you need to do plant medicine? Okay, because it's a powerful tool, but it can also quickly become an addiction. So you have to ask yourself why you're doing anything, really. Okay, so that's what I would say about that. And so to do plant medicine safely, please do frequency work and become very stable internally. Okay, because you just need to be really mindful of being back embodied in the center of yourself, okay, with your essence, all of you centered in the 0 point of space and time, or you can be really terrible. So to clear distortions, to become internally strong, and make damn sure that your Kunandero, it knows what they're doing, okay, and it brings you safely back into this space-time resonance. Like truly, it's important. Some of them are very good. Some of them, I don't know what the heck they're doing. It's like this thing that's become trendy now, and they just give you ayahuasca with no training. Okay. And some people are doing it like a party drug. This is a sacred plant. It's not to be messed with. It has a consciousness. And she's a hard teacher. So if you're not prepared for her, really, you should be aware before you take ayahuasca. It's a thing. Okay. So what is the difference between an ego death and the mind breaking? So to me, your mind breaking, to me, okay, the way I would define it, is that your mind is not centered enough in one space-time resonance. Okay, so it fractures because it can't compute all of the things that are happening to it. Does that make sense? So it's experiencing different space-time resonances in a way that it cannot handle, and therefore is scary, terrifying, and also not coherent. That's right? So you can't tell where you are. It's like you're adrift in all these different realities and you can't tell where you are, okay? Or you can't tell what's real, not real. You know what I mean? Like what's the thing that you're interacting with consistently, all right? So that to me is what the mind breaking is. An ego death is very different to me. An ego death is simply when, and a lot of people will do this, have an ego death or a series of ego deaths when they're doing frequency work. An ego death to me, so an ego death is when you have an identity that you think is you. Okay, so it's like, I guess I'll use myself. So my name is Karen. I do this for my work. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is my relationship with my husband. It's always like this. I tend to be like this with my friends. It's always the same. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have a consistent set identity of how I interact with the world around me. Yes, and what I believe about myself and others, etc. As you do frequency work, your identity starts to shift, meaning you start to lose your attachment to what you think all those things are. Okay, your construct of the world, what you think is true, what you think is not true, what you're attached to, what you're not attached to, your expectations, your assumptions, your conclusions, all those things start to dissolve. And as those things dissolve, that's what I call an ego death. I don't know what anyone else would call it, but I would call that an ego death, where those attachments to what you think is true and real and the way you think should be, and if they're not, then you get pissed off. All those rules, when that starts to dissolve or you start to lose that identity, to me, that's an ego death. And what happens is when that part of your identity is released, you start to open in terms of your possibility because you become more fluid. And you not only are, it sounds like you're like adrift, you're more fluid because you don't have the same level of expectation. So that means that you can be more present in the moment and be more open to what unfolds as opposed to set on what you think should be. Does that make sense? So in the one sense, you become more fluid and more adaptive. And the others, you're much more stable actually and grounded because from a spirit sense, but not from an ego standpoint. Does that make sense? You're not fixed on anything particular from your mind in terms of what you think should be, but from a spirit standpoint, your resonance is more clear. more strong. You know who you are from a spirit perspective, meaning you as infinite indestructible consciousness, not you as ego. Make sense? So hopefully that clarifies, Patricia. That was a great question and a big one. All right. I'm going to answer maybe 2 more. Oh, okay. So Pam's maybe? Okay. What are the benefits of accessing the multiverses, and have they always existed? How can you tell when sleeping if you're dreaming or actually accessing the multiverses? Okay. Excuse me. All right. I cleared my throat because this is a big question. All right. So what are the benefits of accessing the multiverses, and have they all? So the multiverses have all existed. They're always here. They're always present. Just like your the way that you access them has to do with your frequency resonance. The higher your frequency resonance, not only the more possibilities can you access, but the more you can access in terms of the multiverses. Okay, so some of you know this, and I've said this before, like your frequency resonance is like a keyhole, and you're looking at your reality like through a keyhole, and the higher your frequency resonance is, okay, the more you can access, and it also broadens. Okay, so what you become aware of increases. Make sense? That's how frequency resonance works. Okay. So the multiverses have always existed, just like you have always existed as consciousness. You're infinite. The multiverses are infinite. Okay. So what's the benefit of accessing them? Well, I guess it's like, what's the benefit of exploring? It's really to, it's like, why do you travel? We travel because we like to experience something that we haven't before. We get to see how someone else lives, what their perspective of life is, what foods they eat, what they do in their spare time. It gives us a glimpse into a different way or perspective of life. Well, the multiverses are the same. They give you a different perspective of life, a different expression of how life unfolds. So it's the same kind of as traveling on Earth, except it's much broader. So what can you gain from accessing the multiverses? So what I'll say is this. I'm going to distinguish. The multiverses exist at different consciousness levels. Okay, so it's not one directional. Okay, so the multiverses are infinite. Okay, at every consciousness level. Does that make sense? It's not just like, here are all the multiverses. It's the multiverses existing at all these different consciousness levels. Well, just think about how much there is to explore. Right? So as you start to explore the multiverses, some of you are like, meh, multiverses, that's kind of interesting, but this is still this dimensional, this consciousness level. I prefer to increase my consciousness level. And now I get to not only experience consciousness at a different level, I get to experience other perspectives of consciousness or other perspectives of life at a higher consciousness level. Does that make sense? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of more interested in that. Because when you start to do that, you, for me personally, I don't know what anyone else would say, but for me personally, to access the higher dimensional realms, to access the multiverses, it's learning. It's kind of like things are revealed to you from a perspective that you wouldn't normally have because you didn't even know that it was possible. And then you experience something, you're like, whoa, this is totally possible. Right? And it just allows you to expand your own resonance and what it is that you get to experience. Make sense? So for me, that would be the reason to do it. Also, I'm also very just curious, right? So I'm like, ooh, I mean, I also like to travel in my physical body because I kind of want to try the churros in Mexico, and I want to try the chocolate in France, and I like to eat, and you know what I mean? I like to, you know what I mean? I want to see the textiles in India, you know what I mean? Like to me, that's fascinating. And I like to experience that. So it's the same with consciousness, like what you get to experience, right? From different, in different realms, and what can you learn from them? That's my perspective. Okay, I'm not saying that's why other people do it, but that's why I would be curious about it. And and not everyone explores the multiverses in this embodiment. So for example, some of you are here to really experience the physicalness of life. Because remember, the physicalness is 0.00000001. So the human experience is amazing. Okay. Everyone thinks, okay, I'm going to go explore the multiverses. You can, it's awesome. And you as embodiment in the density and form is awesome. Do you know how rare it is? 0.000001 or whatever it is. Okay. So small. So the physicalness of you is something spectacular to experience. I know it doesn't always feel that way. I mean, I get it. Okay. But this in itself is an incredible thing to experience. Okay. So it teaches you things. So all of these things are things to learn from. Okay. To answer your question, Pam. How can you tell when you're sleeping if you're a dreamer or actually accessing the multiverses? Okay. It depends on your frequency resonance, and it depends on how much you journey when you sleep. Some of you, when you start to access higher levels of frequency resonance, you're actually starting to experience different space-time resonances, okay? Different consciousness levels. Sorry, that's incorrect. I was just corrected. No, okay? Sorry, meaning like it's like I'm feeling that and I just realized I said that wrong, okay? So what it is that it's not that you experience different, some of you, splitting hairs. Some of you, if you get to a high enough consciousness level, will start to experience higher levels of consciousness. It is possible through your dream space, okay? And you will start to know it there first before you know it in your embodiment, okay? And some of you will experience different realms. Does that make sense? On this consciousness level. So when I say I was just corrected, I had a realization from my higher self perspective that what I said was not correct. Okay, so that's what I meant by that, in case anybody was wondering what I meant by that. Okay, all right. So does that answer your question, Pam? So for you, you're starting to access different realms at this consciousness level because you're so active in your dream space. What will happen is, as you rise in frequency resonance, because you're so active in your dream space, you'll start to be able to potentially access different higher level of consciousness through your dream space. Okay, to answer your question. Okay. Yes, great. What is the difference between the death space and the void space? Oh, they overlap. It's a good question. So the death space is a form of the void. It's your embodied experience of the void. So a death space, so anybody who's done coherence mastery, I talk about the death space actually quite a bit because it's important to know when you're going through one. It's important to know what to do when you're in it, to get the most out of it, why you're going through it, all that sort of stuff. So anybody who's done coherence mastery will know what that is. But essentially what you're doing is you're having an embodied experience of the void. All right. So it is you being in this space where so the death space, okay, just as a synopsis, is a space that you go to where it will feel like everything stops. Okay. So no matter how much you want to plan, no matter how much you do want to move forward, you're just in the space where like everything just kind of stops. And it's a space where if you don't know what it is, I didn't the first 2 times I was in one, and I tried to fight my way through it, just like muscle my way through it and intend to do things and go into a tremendous amount of action. So I would just put all this energy trying to move forward and nothing would gel and I would have no forward momentum because I was in the death space, which is a form of the void, which is where you're supposed to go to have dissolution of something. Okay, it's a space where you're supposed to be releasing a whole bunch of things that no longer serve you. So if you fight it with your will, it's not helpful. You'll just be there longer. Okay, so it is the death space, the way I would talk about it. And there is an episode of Mastering Your Will through Frequencies called The Spaces in Between. So if you don't know the difference between the death space and the void, I recommend watching that because I talk about it at length there. But it's called The Spaces in Between, and that would be a good reference for you. I don't remember the episode number, unfortunately, but if you ever want to know what an episode number is, you can always email info@sphericalluminosity.com. So this death space is your physical experience of the void, if that makes sense. Okay. It's what? Oh, it's episode 133, in case you want to know. All right, so that hopefully will answer your question. All right. And Fiona mentioned the first time I was in the death space, I hated it. Now she loves it. I would agree with that. The death space gives you a tremendous perspective because you're so neutral. You're like super new. It's the most fascinating thing. You're like, things happen. You just watch it. You're like, yeah, all right, that doesn't really bother me. A person just said something to me that was kind of rude. Yep, don't really care. And you can see your triggers really clearly. And there's so much that you can release in the death space. It's fantastic. Now, if you were a control freak like I used to be, and I didn't know what it was, oh my God, it's exhausting because I just fought it like crazy. Don't do that. like from my experience, you're going to be in the death space as long as you need to be in the death space in order to release what you need to. It's your higher self dictating it, not anything else. So you're there. If you're there, it's actually a gift to you. You just have to know how to be in it. Okay. So the death space is actually a tremendous gift.
What's the different kind of death space? It's like the physical death space. We have lifetimes also.
Oh yeah, Chris is just saying because when it's funny in our culture when we use the word death, everyone freaks out. So the death space, the way that Vola is asking, is very. I don't mean physical death, right? So please no, I'm not talking. I mean, there is physical death. If you want to know more about physical death, I do a whole episode called "Demystifying the Dead," and you can watch that, and that will tell you about like physical death. But if you're curious about the death space, which happens when you're alive, and is more to do with the ego death that Patricia asked about earlier, when you have an ego death, it can often happen, and you'll be in the death space when that happens. Okay, so that's what I think Vola is asking about. That is in episode 133. The Demystifying the Dead episode is episode 115, and that is about physical death. Okay, that is a totally separate topic. All right, hopefully that is clarifying and not confusing. All right. All right, guys. All right, so I answered a ton of your questions. I am going to now get to the GFC. I almost forgot that I was even doing it, but here we are. So I'm going to be giving a GFC right now. Okay, and the purpose of this GFC is going to help you come out of the mind, because we've been talking about all these questions and there's a lot of things that we need to understand. Really, it's about having the mind become less dominant, okay, and having the experience of you raising your frequency resonance and having an experience of the big S self more and being more in that 0 point of space and time. Truly, I know it sounds like I keep banging on about the same things, and that's why I do that. I do actually focus in the 6 core essentials, because it really is about the 6 core essentials. Okay, so in any case, things on spirit level are much easier than we think. We, with our minds and our stories and our meanings, tend to make things a lot more complicated. But in any case, for the GFC right now, that's what we're doing. We're going to help decrease the mind dominance, come into the 0 point, and strengthen there, because that is where all of magic happens. All right, everyone, settling in. Let's rise together. Becoming aware of your body. And as you become aware of the body, becoming aware of the weight of your body as it settles into whatever's supporting you. So notice as you become aware of your weightedness, if you're like holding in any way, okay, like holding yourself tense, or if you're actually able to be at ease and just comfortable with letting yourself feel heavier, okay, just through the limbs, through your fleshiness. Yeah. Noticing your breath. Good. Becoming aware, when you're ready, of the soles of your feet. Noticing the fleshiness of your heels, the stretch of the skin over the balls of the feet, the space between your toes. Good. And now please become aware of the base of your groin. Okay, so right underneath you. And now becoming aware of the distance or the space between the very center of the earth and the base of your groin. Yeah. And now please become aware of your center point of your solar plexus. So the distance between your belly button and the base of your sternum, you find the midpoint between those two things. So your sternum is that big thick bone in the center of your chest where your ribs meet in front of your body. So you find the bottom of that, okay? Between that and your belly button, find your midpoint of that. That's your solar plexus in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. Just becoming aware of that space. Just pulling you all further in to the 0 point of space and time. Good. Keeping your attention here in the center point of your solar plexus. Let's go ahead and ask ourselves the question: how can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? And that question again, for those of you who are new, is how can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? So whether you're aware of it or not, by asking yourself that question, your higher self responds by quickening your own frequency resonance. So it's like you're starting to take a running jump. And I'm catching you here on the top end of your jump and pulling your frequency resonance higher, irrespective of where you began. Good. So bringing your attention now, please, to your right shoulder blade and along your spine from behind your heart space all the way up into your brain. So this has to do with attachment from the mind. Okay. It wants to know certain things, be able to figure it out. Things should be this way. You know, likes to have meaning. Mhm. Yeah. Imagining being aware of, feeling, or just even knowing a very, very clear sea blue light. So, whatever color of the sea of blue, that light expanding within the space of the right shoulder blade in this part of the spine. Good. Excellent. Bring your attachment, please. Excuse me. Bring your attention, please, to your heart space and to the front of your throat. Thank you. So the mind likes to have dominance. It just does. It likes to know what's what. It likes to know like certain parameters so it feels safe. Okay. So it feels like it's in charge. That things are, under control. That it's all going to be okay. So releasing this it sounds odd to say that you're attached to your mind, and you are. Okay, so having a certain perspective. So let's release this. I mean, you think it's you, so it seems normal, but really it's an attachment to a certain perspective that's filtered through your mind. Yeah, imagining a brilliance from deep within the very core of you, starting to expand outwards in all directions through your whole body, out through your skin, there we go. Good. Very nice. Yeah, bring your attention right into the center of the heart space, please. So this has to do with attachment to what we think we want. It's a big one. All right. For some of you, this is many, many layers deep. Right? There we go. Good. Bring your attention now, please, to your heart space, all the way down through the center of the body to the xiphoid process, which is right at the base of your sternum. So inside the body. Okay, so you're going in through the center of the heart space, down through the center of the body to about the level of your xiphoid process, which is right at the base of your sternum. Okay. And that right shoulder blade. So on the back side of you. Okay, so this is fear. All right. So when we don't know what we're doing, or we're unclear, or we're encountering something new, or we're uncertain, we tend to go into fear. Okay, or you don't trust yourself, whatever's happening. Okay, so this is a fear distortion. So as you start to strengthen and get more confidence in yourself, as you start to rise in your frequency resonance, we can start to, sorry, I'm working and talking at the same time. I'm just going to release it first. This fear pattern. Where we can go into when we're not sure what's happening. Okay? Or even if you're experiencing self-doubt because someone told you it was supposed to be some way and then it wasn't. It was something else. Okay, whatever it is, just releasing this quite strong fear pattern here. For some of you, it's not fear, it's like a contraction. Okay, just meaning like your frequency resonance like contracts and drops a bit. For some of you, it's full on fear. Right? So it kind of depends on who you are and what subgroup you're in. Yeah, I'm working on a little subgroup here. So when something shows up as different than what you expect, you go into resistance. Okay, I think we've all experienced this at some point or another. Okay, we're like, no. Okay, you just resist. You dig in. No, it's not like that. Okay, hang on. So that doesn't super help. Only creates a lot of friction and, well, an experience of suffering for some. So let's release that. Okay, it's not all of you, subgroup. Releasing this as well. There we go. There we go. Becoming aware, please, of your pineal gland right in the center of your brain and the very center of your heart space. So creating more coherence, alignment between these two centers. So as your frequency resonance rises, the more coherence you're in, the more alignment you're in, the more these two spaces work in harmony and with more specificity together. The more the higher realms open to you. It's not important that they do. What's important is that your frequency resonance is high enough so the possibility is there. Okay? What you actually experience is less important. Because I know we can get caught up in like, oh my God, I don't experience all these different things. It's okay. All that matters is your resonance is high enough that you could. There we go. Really good. Yeah. Excellent. Bring your attention now to the xiphoid process, right at the base of your sternum. So your sternum starts right underneath the hollow of your throat. You trace it all the way down to its base, right beneath it, where it goes from bone to flesh. And it's a little bit sore when you press on it. That's your xiphoid process. So between your xiphoid process, okay, and about 3 inches just beneath it, down towards the belly button in a straight line, clearing out your pain body. And the reason we're clearing out your pain body is because it remembers you before all the frequency work was done. Good. Everyone take a nice deep breath in. Hold it for a second or two, releasing with some sound. Staying in this space if you'd like, or blinking your eyes open, looking at something inanimate. All right, guys. So thank you for joining me as we went way, way, way out into left field and brought you some stability in addition. So I look forward to seeing you on our next YouTube Live or however our paths cross next. Bye for now.